Hello everyone. When it comes to ideas and creating fun in a video game, there's lots of great resources out there, good books, good online articles, etc. Today, you'll see the word very plainly up there in terms of ideas. What I wanted to do instead of how to generate them in a generic sense is give you a quick example on how you would do that. And I'm starting straight from scratch, so none of this stuff is pre-scripted. So before I go ahead, the first thing I'm going to do here is take out the word or letter S, because we're going to talk about one idea. And what is that idea? Well, you can get them from a host of things. I always suggest two things. If you're going to do a game, why not pick a hobby that you have that you're passionate about other than video games? Although there's been video games about making video games, so you could do that as well. And then the other section I would say is something that you do often, and it can be a practice. I remember there's a game called Paperboy, which made me take notice because way back in the day I was a paperboy, and it actually had a video game that kind of made it, I don't know, fun or challenging at least to do so. So what do? Do you collect stamps? Well, think of a stamp game. Do you often sort your sock drawer? Well, there's the idea for another game, and nothing is too stupid, believe it or not, because you'd be amazed at what can come out of a very simple idea. In fact, that's what I'm going to do here, is pick a very simple idea. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to forgo my hobbies, and I think what I'll do is talk about something maybe I do during the day, like let's say go shopping for food, or I teach, or maybe get gas at a gas station. Let's try that. Let me pick shopping, just because I think that it'd be nice to play a game and then when you're actually shopping, remembering the fun of the game as opposed to the boredom of the shopping that is at hand. So here's my idea. We're going to have a shopping game. And as you can see, I am going as simple as you can here. I'm not even using PowerPoint, just going to go straight to Word, because I think the best thing to do in this case is just create lists. If you have a list, then you can work for it. And in games, there's an old adage, or at least what we used to work with, is the idea that if you can explain your game in a paragraph, the nouns become objects and the verbs become the mechanics of your game. So laying things out just in terms of English help you set up the game itself. So what do you have to do in shop? Well, you gotta pay the cashier, pick items out. There's some searching involved. And let's talk about these first three things. So pay the cashier. Paying is the verb, so that becomes the mechanic. You actually have to have an amount of money and it has to go to somebody. So there has to be that transaction in there. If that's the case, what we could say then to make it a little more challenging is that if you have to pay the cashier, you should have a budget. So you have to get everything under a specific numbers. The other thing that, since we said searching and the budget, what also brings it up is you actually have to have a list too, right? So maybe in this case, you have to get everything on the list or something that will take its place. That makes sense? So you can fill all your objects in this case. Let me move this. There we go. So we have the budget and we have a list that comes from it, and the challenge will be to get that list. But because we have a list and we might not be able to put everything in our budget, then what we also have to have is have a wide range of foods, I guess, items at the store. So then that would allow our player to be able to pick different things. So in other words, if you have bread on the list, well, there's not a lot of ways you can get around bread, but maybe buns are on sale. You can say, oh, well, instead of bread, if buns are half as much as bread, then that might actually allow them to get under budget. And it also allows them to be a little bit more creative. And the mechanic there then also is that is bread comparable with buns? Because if you say, okay, I have to buy a loaf of bread, and you end up buying a big piece of steak, that's not in the same category. So then you have when it comes to items, you'll have to have categories as well that not only are seen to the user. So in other words, he can go over to the fresh food aisle or the vegetable and fruit area, produce. Then they also can go to there is also categories behind the scenes, so that an apple is roughly equal to an orange, but not equal to an onion. The categories that the user can see and the user has to deduce are two separate categories. One you kept shown, so shown, and we'll call that areas within a mart, and then not shown, and we'll call it food equivalents or something like that. And that makes more sense. So now, as you can see, now we have a bullet under every significant bullet here other than the name of the game. And as we go, we can just build on this. Well, how do you make it more challenging? Well, you could have like a kart race or something. Yeah, put a mini game in there. How about that? Mini games. And like cart navigation, because if you've ever gone grocery shopping, you know that there's always somebody who just like drives out in front of you, like in the real world, and then there's also somebody who will just park right in the middle of the lane, diagonal, so you can't get around them. So you could have like a mini game within the game itself, and you could also, if that's the case, you could even put a time limit on the overall game, like, okay, you got to get out of here in an hour because you have a meeting or something like that. So all these ideas, and as you can see, I'm starting to fill the page up now, can go into your game that can make it both challenging and hopefully fun. And if you have too many, so let's say I end up doing like 5 pages of this, you can always trim it back at the end. And what I believe in terms of finding fun is probably the agile approach may be the best, just where you're testing every few weeks. So just to see what goes over well and what doesn't. And the testing doesn't have to be on people, or it should be done on people, but it doesn't have to be done on people like from society or away from the game. You can actually test it in-house every 3 weeks and say, hey, are we enjoying this? I think I read about League of Legends or something like that, and when they really found out that they knew that the game would work was that the employees were testing it, were playing it after hours. So they weren't going home. They're actually playing the game with each other after hours as opposed to just when they had to. And the same thing, let's say for our shopping game. When something hits and you find yourself wanting to do it in the game, chances are somebody else is going to want to do that as well. Now, there's other stuff in here that you can think of. In this case, since we have a time limit, we might say something like, we're going to have to do this in real time then. That makes sense. It wouldn't be worth going turn-based. You could use analogous time, which we'll talk about later on, but there has to be some type of time built into it. And then you'll also see some other that all of a sudden force you to address or, in fact, institute. And I'll give an example of addressing. So you're picking items out, so that means you have to have some type of space. And that could be 3D, where you're just driving around literally in first person view or over the shoulder um, third person view. Or you could have something to the effect of do a 2D layout uh, and do it overhead. Or would you say top down might be the better one? I put first person. I want to put S there, but I don't think we should make it a shooter. So all these things will start to fall out, and every time you put a period, or I'm saying period, but really it's a list. Every time I have a dash or a bullet or something of that nature, it's probably going to get you to think about it more, and eventually I am going to have 5 pages of this. And I would suggest, if you're thinking about making a game right now, go ahead and do this. It's because it can be kind of fun and therapeutic. And when you think you're done, just go back through the whole list and say, let's see, I have a list. How am I going to store this list? Where am I going to put this list? Is this list going to be a pop out from the GUI? Is it going to look like a sheet of paper where I can physically look at it? Or is it going to be like a inventory where it becomes its own window? That sort of thing. All these things kind of come out, and it can really enhance your game. In the end, we have a shopping game that at first sounded kind of silly, right? Who would want to make a game about shopping? But in the end, we can have something that might actually be interesting and maybe a little comical and fun to play that way. So go ahead and give that a try. Maybe it'll be something that looks so good that I want to take out my wallet and put some money down for it.